Hey everyone. So today I've got this SR500 in the shop that doesn't have a clutch. I don't know what's wrong with it yet, but that's what we're gonna try to figure out today. And hopefully this will help somebody out there that's got a similar bike, maybe has a similar issue. So the first thing I noticed with this bike in particular is that the clutch has slack all the way until the lever is well past this reference bolt that I'm using. So see that? Now, if I go look at the other two SR500s I have, we can compare that and see where they are. So you'll notice on this one, the clutch starts to get firm right at about where that reference bolt is. Now on this other one, it's about the same place as the second bike, just past that bolt. Now back to the bike in question, you can see there's no pressure until well past there. So that leads me to think that it's not just a stretched clutch cable, and it doesn't have to do with the adjustments. There must be something happening either in the pivot shaft, the adjuster right here behind this cover, or possibly the actual through rod that pushes on the clutch plates on the other side. So let me take this cover off, get this adjuster out, pull the shaft off, and have a look at it. Okay, so now with this cam adjuster slash retainer for this pivot arm loosened, I can take it off. Okay. You can see how it adjusts, and I've already played with the adjustment and no such luck. I'm gonna need both my hands to take this off, so let me get the camera on a stand. So now you can see how that works. It's just a little cam. Okay, so now you can see that I need to remove this spring. Okay, with that spring off, this shaft just pulls right out. Now, sometimes these will get really worn, and as you can see, this one definitely has some wear. Shouldn't be enough to make it not engage at all though. That's just a little bit of indent wear there. So I don't think that this is the culprit. So that leads me to the next step, which is going to be taking off the clutch cover, inspecting the clutch plates, the push rod, and make sure that everything's intact over there. Okay, I've got the bike gently leaned over on a cooler, making sure that it's not contacting anything except the frame and part of the motor. And I leaned it over like this because I just changed the oil on it and I didn't want to have to drain all that and put it back in or anything. So by leaning it over, I should be able to get this clutch cover off without hardly any oil loss. So let's start taking it apart. Okay, now with the clutch cover off, we can have a look around, make sure there isn't anything broken or out of place. If all that looks good, take off the clutch plate. So I always loosen these in stages in a star pattern just to relieve pressure evenly. And once it's off, you want to look at the back of it, make sure there's no scoring to the face. Okay, we set that aside, and then I just got to see what this push rod looks like. Okay, so this is really interesting, and I think we found the problem. The end of this here isn't supposed to look like that. It should be symmetrical to the other side. Also, I'll be curious if anybody else has seen this, but I've never seen the tip be actually fused to the rod like this. That's really weird. Those are supposed to be two separate parts. Anyway, we'll get back to that. For now, I'll pull off these clutch plates, and with clutch plates, you want to make sure they're flat and they haven't warped. On the steel plates, you want to make sure there isn't any bluing or scoring. That's usually a sign that they've overheated and might be warped. For the friction plates, you just want to measure them and make sure they still have enough thickness for wear. Since I'm going to reuse all of these, I'm going to make sure I keep them all in the same order and facing the same direction, just because they've already broken in together. So I'll set these aside, and let's go over to the bench and look at this rod and see what's going on. Okay, so this push rod for some reason is missing one end, and it should look like this. So if this was something you run into, maybe just buy a new push rod. But I like to make work for myself, so I'm gonna machine a new end to this push rod. So I'll use a little oversized rod here and cut a piece off, and then that's what I'll go chuck up in my lathe, and we'll machine a new end that's a little longer than the original one. So machining this piece turned out to be a bit of a pain. The spirals on the end of it are actually really important because those are what allow oil to actually travel through the rod's housing. So I needed to be able to machine spirals into this end piece, and the way I did that was by setting my lathe to cut 4 threads per inch, which is so big that on the small piece like this, it creates a spiral effect. And it ended up working out great, but I didn't have enough room on the piece to run the machine without risking hitting the tool bit against the chuck, so I actually just did it all by hand, turning the machine manually. So it took forever, but I'm happy with the result. I boiled down about 30 minutes of me hand turning my lathe into less than a minute here, so you can skip it if you want, or enjoy watching it at 30 times the normal speed. Once I finally got that cut and sized, this is what I got. So I looked up the original length of the SR500 push rods, and it looks like it's about 7 1/8 inch. This one was a little too short, I think having to do with whatever happened to the end. So I machined my new end piece to be a little bit long, and the overall length now is right on. So let's go test it out on the bike. So I get the push rod and parts back in, and for some reason it was far too long. And it occurred to me I hadn't actually checked for the original end piece deep inside there. So I did this time, and sure enough, there it is. Cool. So I probably didn't need to spend half an hour making an end piece, but I did, and that's okay because whatever happened to this piece to separate them made it so that it was going to be too short anyway. It's almost like somebody took this rod and like broke or cut off the end and maybe even shaved down a little bit and then put it back together. I don't know why, but anyway, it was too short, so it all worked out. This new piece that I made is about 1/8 inch longer, and that's exactly what it needed to restore the original length. So when I installed the old through rod with my new end piece, everything fits together perfectly. Now there's a little trick to installing this plate. You can't just line it up with the 6 holes, put it on, and call it good, because the teeth on the back of it here, they have to actually mate to the teeth on the clutch basket. If you installed it like this, with this gap up here, you would get a clutch that doesn't engage. So it's important to check that, make sure it feels tight. If not, rotate it, put it back in until it clicks into place. You should have no gap between the face and the first clutch plate. Once that's put together right, it's time to reinstall the clutch springs. And just like with loosening them, I tighten them in small increments, going in a star pattern, to equally apply pressure to the faceplate. Then I hooked the clutch cable back up and gave it a test, and you can see it actuating properly. That's a good sign. Okay, so now that we got everything buttoned back up and it looks like it's working right, I need to put the clutch cover back on. But I don't have a new gasket and the old one is trash. So I decided to use some of my gasket material and just make a new one from scratch. And I ended up doing a whole video on how to make your own gasket. I'll have a link to that video in the description if you want to see the process. I install all my gaskets dry these days. I used to use RTV and different types of silicones, but what I learned is that they just make a mess and they create unnecessary risk where you can never know if some of that RTV squeezed out onto the inside of the case, and that can potentially break off and clog oil ways or just get in the way. So it's better to just install it dry, and if you get a little oil drip once in a while, that's not as bad as the alternative. And really, if a gasket's made right and the mating surfaces are clean and flat, you shouldn't get any leaks anyway. Now, if you're also working on an SR500, don't forget to grab that kick shaft washer out of the oil tray and reinstall it. Okay, let me get this cover back on and get everything all buttoned up. Now that it's all put together, let me go around and check the clutch. So here we can see it's got good tension where I want it now. And it has a good feel at the lever, so I think I'm ready to start it up and take it for a spin. So I'm wearing this MX boot because about 6 months ago, I severely hurt my ankle kickstarting an SR500 just like this. I'll make a short on how to properly start these and put a link in the description in case you're curious.